The studio falls silent. Ellen leans forward, eyes sharp. So Meghan, did the royals really try to silence you? The audience gasps. Meghan freezes, her smile fades. Cameras zoom in as she whispers, "You have no idea what they did." Ellen's grin disappears. A tense pause. Then, Meghan stands up, removes her mic and storms off the stage. Producers rush in. The screen cuts to black. The lights of the Ellen show glimmered across the studio as Meghan Markle walked out, her elegant smile dazzling the crowd. The audience cheered, cameras flashed, and Ellen stood to greet her with open arms. It looked like every other celebrity interview, warm, relaxed, polished. Meghan waved to the fans, her calm presence filling the stage. Dressed in a sleek white outfit, she sat down gracefully, crossing her legs, her composure unbreakable. Ellen began with her trademark charm, joking lightly and praising Meghan's new project. Meghan laughed politely, her voice smooth, her eyes kind. But behind that poised exterior, there was a flicker, something hidden, something that didn't match her perfect smile. Ellen leaned in, smiling, but her tone changed slightly. "You've been working on amazing things, Meghan," she said, "but I have to ask, after everything, do you ever miss royal life?" The audience fell silent. Meghan's smile froze for a heartbeat. "I think," she began carefully, "some chapters are better left closed." Her words were calm, but her eyes carried weight. Ellen nodded, sensing tension but pressing forward. "You once said you wanted to use your voice. Were you ever told not to?" Meghan's hand tightened on the armrest. The warmth in her expression dimmed. "Let's just say," she replied softly, "some people prefer silence when the truth makes them uncomfortable." A quiet murmur rippled through the audience. Ellen's grin faded as she studied Meghan closely. "So, they did try to silence you?" she asked. The question hung heavy in the air. Meghan looked down, then slowly met Ellen's eyes. "When power fears truth," she said, her tone sharp but calm, "it does everything to control it." The studio went still. Even the band at the corner stopped moving. Ellen's confident smile faltered for the first time that night. "That sounds painful," she whispered. Meghan nodded slightly. "It was," she said. "And sometimes the hardest part isn't being silenced, it's pretending you're fine while the world watches." For a long second no one spoke. The audience didn't know whether to clap or hold their breath. Meghan's charm was still there, but it had turned into something else, steel beneath grace. Ellen tried to lighten the mood again, but Meghan's expression didn't soften. "You learn to hide the cracks," she said quietly. "But they're still there." Her voice carried through the silent studio like a confession. The atmosphere shifted, no longer a cheerful interview, but a collision between the mask and the truth. Behind the cameras, the producers exchanged uneasy looks. Everyone could feel it, the energy had changed. Ellen smiled nervously and said, "Well, we'll be right back after this." But Meghan's eyes didn't leave hers. For a moment, it was as if they both knew the line had been crossed. The applause sign lit up, and the audience clapped mechanically, unaware that the calm before the storm had just ended. Meghan leaned back in her chair, her smile polite but distant, her mind far away. The cameras cut to commercial, but what happened in those silent seconds would linger, an unspoken tension, a truth hovering in the air. And though no one realized it yet, that was only the beginning of what would soon become one of the most talked about interviews in television history. The show returned from a short break, and the audience clapped cheerfully, unaware of what was about to unfold. Meghan sat gracefully on the couch, adjusting her posture, her smile calm but slightly guarded. Ellen turned toward her, cue cards in hand, but her eyes revealed curiosity, the kind that digs deeper than any rehearsed interview. "So, Meghan," Ellen began, her tone casual but laced with something sharper, "you've talked about independence, about stepping away from royal life, but what everyone really wants to know is, what really happened behind palace doors?" The question hit like a spark in a quiet room. The audience's applause faded mid-clap. Meghan's expression didn't change immediately, but the air around her thickened. She tilted her head slightly, forcing a polite smile. "That's a big question, Ellen," she said softly, her voice steady but her tone edged with tension. Ellen laughed awkwardly, glancing at the crowd. "Oh, come on, give us something. The world's been guessing for years." Meghan's fingers curled around the arm of the chair. Her perfect composure trembled for just a second before she regained it. "You know," she began, her words slow and deliberate, "people love stories, especially the ones they aren't supposed to hear." Ellen leaned in closer, her grin fading into curiosity. "So there are secrets?" she asked quickly, sensing the weight of the moment. The audience went silent again, waiting. Meghan's gaze shifted toward the crowd, then back to Ellen. There are things that were never meant to reach the public, she said quietly. And maybe, that's why I left. The room felt colder. A few people in the audience exchanged uneasy looks. Even Ellen, who thrived on tension, seemed unsure of her next move. Are you saying the royal family tried to hide something? She pressed, lowering her voice. Meghan looked straight at her. The practiced calm was gone, replaced by something raw. I'm saying, she replied, her words cutting through the silence, that when you live inside walls built on tradition, truth becomes the enemy. Ellen blinked, caught off guard by the sharpness in her tone. The camera zoomed in slightly, capturing every flicker of emotion on Meghan's face, the restraint, the hurt, the defiance. That sounds serious, Ellen said softly. It was, Meghan answered. There are things I saw, things I experienced that I'll never forget. But some truths, they're too dangerous for those who want to keep their power. The audience gasped, the weight of her words sinking in. Ellen hesitated, realizing she had stepped onto dangerous ground. But curiosity pushed her further. Were you ever threatened, Meghan? Told to stay quiet? Meghan gave a small, bitter laugh. Threatened? She repeated, her tone darkly amused. Let's just say silence wasn't a choice, it was expected. Ellen's eyes widened slightly. Expected by who? Meghan paused, looking directly into the camera as if addressing someone unseen. By those who feared what would happen if the world knew the truth. The silence that followed was deafening. No laughter, no applause, just tension. Ellen shifted in her seat, trying to regain control of the conversation. You don't have to answer anything that makes you uncomfortable, she offered gently, but it was too late. The atmosphere had already shifted. Meghan's eyes softened, but her voice carried a quiet power. Uncomfortable is fine, she said. It's silence that destroys you. The crowd murmured again, sensing they were witnessing something unscripted, something real. Ellen smiled weakly, trying to bring back the light-hearted tone. You always know how to say things that make us think. Meghan nodded politely, but the damage was done. In that moment, the elegant, polished tone of the show was gone. What replaced it was a current of tension that rippled through every corner of the room. Ellen looked down at her cards, unsure of what to say next. Meghan sat still, her calm returned, but her eyes betrayed something deeper, pain mixed with liberation. Behind the cameras, the producers whispered nervously, realizing this was no longer just an interview, it was a revelation unfolding live. The crowd didn't know it, but this question, Ellen's forbidden one, had crossed an invisible line. And though Meghan's response had been measured, everyone in the room could feel it. Something powerful had just shifted. The truth was no longer contained, and the storm that had been brewing quietly inside her had finally begun to rise. The air in the studio grew heavy, as if the bright lights themselves had begun to burn hotter. Meghan Markle sat upright on the couch, but her posture had stiffened. Just moments ago, her smile had filled the room with ease and grace, but now that same smile trembled at the corners. The charm she carried like armor began to crack. Ellen's last question still echoed in the air. Were you told to stay quiet? And the silence that followed stretched uncomfortably long. Meghan's eyes darted briefly toward the audience, then back to Ellen, her jaw tightening. The cameras zoomed in, catching the faintest flicker of unease. For the first time since she entered the stage, Meghan's confidence seemed to waver. The laughter and lightheartedness from earlier had evaporated, replaced by a thick, uneasy quiet. Ellen tried to maintain her usual calm, but even she seemed unsure how to proceed. Are you okay? Ellen asked softly, breaking the silence. It was a simple question, but it carried too much weight. Meghan took a breath, her fingers lightly tracing the edge of her seat. I'm fine, she said quietly, her voice lower than before. I just didn't expect that question. The audience shifted, sensing something real unfolding before them. Her tone wasn't angry, it was careful, deliberate, but layered with tension. I didn't mean to catch you off guard, Ellen said quickly, trying to smooth it over. Meghan nodded, her eyes flickering down for a moment before she looked back up. It's not that, she replied. It's just, sometimes people think they know what happened but they really don't. Her words hung in the air like smoke. The audience stayed silent, unsure whether to applaud or remain still. Ellen leaned back, her usual humor gone, her expression cautious. You don't have to talk about anything you don't want to, she said. Meghan smiled faintly, but it was hollow, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. That's the thing, Meghan said softly. There was a time when I didn't have that choice. The tone of her voice sent a chill through the room. Ellen blinked, surprised by the cold truth beneath her words. What do you mean? She asked, almost whispering. Meghan looked at her, eyes steady but distant. When every word you speak is measured, when every expression is watched, you start to forget who you really are. The crowd fell silent again. Ellen glanced briefly toward the crew, her expression uneasy. Meghan's hands clasped together tightly, her knuckles pale against the bright studio lights. The calm she entered with was gone, replaced by something raw, the quiet tremor of someone holding back too much for too long. Ellen tried to bring the conversation back to lighter ground. "You've been through a lot," she said. "But you seem stronger now." Meghan nodded slowly. "Strength isn't what people think it is," she replied, her tone steady but dark. "Sometimes it's just surviving what others don't see." A low murmur rippled through the crowd. The charm that once drew the audience and now felt replaced by tension and mystery. Ellen smiled weakly, tapping her note cards nervously. "You always have such powerful words," she said, forcing a laugh. But Meghan didn't laugh. She leaned back slightly, her eyes glistening under the harsh studio lights. "Powerful words," she echoed quietly. "That's what scares them the most." Her voice lingered, calm but sharp enough to cut through the silence. Ellen's smile disappeared completely. She looked at Meghan, searching her expression, realizing that the Duchess in front of her was no longer the one who walked on stage 20 minutes ago. For a brief second, the camera caught the shift completely, the smile fading, the sparkle in her eyes dimming into something colder, heavier. Meghan adjusted her posture, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, but her hands trembled slightly. The audience might not have noticed, but Ellen did. "We can change the subject," Ellen offered quickly. Meghan shook her head. "No," she said. "It's fine. People always want to change the subject when the truth gets uncomfortable." Her tone wasn't angry, but it carried an unshakable strength. The crowd didn't clap this time. No one dared to. The tension was alive now, pulsing between them. Ellen shifted in her chair, unsure whether to keep pushing or retreat. Meghan sat still, the silence wrapping around her like a shield. The woman who once spoke with rehearsed poise now looked stripped of all pretense, exposed, vulnerable, yet fierce. Her discomfort wasn't weakness, it was defiance. The shift in her expression told a story louder than words. She had been polite long enough. And as the seconds passed, it became clear that what had begun as a friendly interview was slowly unraveling into something deeper. Something Ellen couldn't control. The silence between Ellen and Meghan stretched, heavy and tense. Ellen tried to smile, but it looked forced, uncertain. The warmth that once filled the studio was gone. Now the room felt colder, sharper. Meghan sat still for a moment, her eyes lowered, her fingers tightening together. Then, slowly she looked up. Her expression had changed, no longer guarded, but resolute. The soft tone in her voice was replaced by something steady and emotional. "You know, Ellen," she began quietly, "people think walking away from that life was easy. They think I wanted attention. But what they don't understand is how much I lost." The crowd fell completely silent. Even Ellen leaned forward slightly, sensing something powerful unfolding before her. "What did you lose?" Ellen asked gently. Meghan hesitated, her eyes glimmering under the harsh lights. "Freedom," she said simply. "And trust." Ellen frowned slightly. "Trust?" she repeated. Meghan nodded. "When every conversation is recorded, every smile is analyzed, you start realizing how little control you actually have. It's not a family, it's a system. And when you stop following their rules, you stop being one of them." Her voice wavered slightly, but her words carried weight. The audience exchanged uneasy glances. Ellen, trying to keep her tone light, said softly, "That sounds lonely." Meghan laughed faintly, but it was a bitter sound. "Lonely doesn't even begin to cover it," she said. "It's like being surrounded by people but knowing every word you say could be turned against you." Ellen nodded slowly, her curiosity taking over again. "Did they ever try to stop you from speaking out?" she asked. Meghan leaned forward, her calm facade slipping. "Try?" she repeated with a quiet laugh. "They didn't just try, Ellen, they succeeded. Every interview, every statement was written for me. Every smile had a purpose. I wasn't a person anymore, I was an image they controlled." The crowd gasped, the atmosphere growing thicker. "And when I tried to speak for myself, when I tried to show who I really was, they made me the villain." Her tone sharpened now, her hands gesturing as her voice rose slightly. "Do you know what it feels like to be painted as ungrateful because you refuse to be silent?" Ellen blinked, caught off guard by the raw emotion in her words. "That must have been hard," she said softly. Meghan's eyes glistened, but she didn't look away. It wasn't just hard, it was suffocating. Every headline, every whisper, designed to break you until you stop fighting back. The room was silent except for her voice. And when you finally decide to leave, they call you a traitor, as if protecting your peace is betrayal. The audience murmured quietly, the tension palpable. Ellen leaned in, lowering her voice. So, when you left, did anyone from the family try to stop you? Meghan's eyes darkened slightly. Some did, she said, pausing. But not because they cared. They were afraid. Afraid that if I left, I might finally tell the truth. She smiled faintly, but there was no humor in it, only pain. And maybe that's why I'm here today, because silence protects the powerful, and I've done enough of that. Ellen sat back, speechless. Her usual composure was gone, replaced by visible discomfort. I didn't expect you to be this honest, she admitted softly. Meghan looked at her with quiet defiance. People never do, she replied. They expect me to smile, to stay polite, to pretend I'm grateful for the cage I escaped from. But I'm tired, Ellen. I'm tired of pretending. Her voice cracked slightly at the end, not from weakness but from exhaustion. The audience watched, mesmerized, as the Duchess who once avoided controversy now spoke like someone reclaiming her voice in real time. Ellen tried to interject. I understand, but Meghan cut her off gently. No, you don't, she said, her tone sharp but not cruel. You can't understand what it's like to be silenced by people who claim to love you. To have your words rewritten, your thoughts filtered, your emotions weaponized against you. That's not family, that's control. Ellen froze, caught off guard by the firmness in her tone. Meghan leaned forward slightly, her eyes steady, unwavering. They wanted obedience, she continued, not honesty. But the truth doesn't die just because they cover it up. The studio was silent, the kind of silence that feels alive. Even the crew, usually bustling behind cameras, stood motionless. Ellen exhaled quietly, realizing there was no turning back. You're very brave to say this, she said softly. Meghan smiled faintly, her voice calm again. Bravery isn't saying what people want to hear, she said. It's saying what they've tried to erase. The audience erupted into cautious applause, unsure if they should, but unable to hold back the emotion building in the room. Meghan looked down briefly, blinking away the tension that shimmered in her eyes, then looked back up with a steady calm. I kept quiet long enough, she whispered. The moment lingered. The crowd, Ellen, the cameras, everyone could feel it. The conversation had shifted from celebrity gossip to something real, painful, and unstoppable. Meghan had fired back not in anger but in truth. And that truth had filled the air like electricity. For the first time that night, Ellen had nothing to say, and Meghan finally looked free. The atmosphere in the studio changed instantly. The laughter that had filled the room moments ago now faded into heavy silence. Meghan's breathing grew shallow, her hands trembling as she tried to keep her composure. The audience watched in stunned confusion. This wasn't the calm, composed Duchess they expected. Ellen attempted to diffuse the tension with her signature humor, but Meghan's eyes burned with something deeper. Frustration, exhaustion, and perhaps heartbreak. You wanted honesty, didn't you? Meghan snapped, her voice trembling but strong. You wanted the truth about what really happened behind those palace walls? Fine, but people don't want the truth, Ellen. They want a version that makes them comfortable. The crowd gasped. Ellen tried to respond, but Meghan raised her hand, signaling she was done. Her words hung in the air like thunder after lightning. I'm done pretending. I came here to talk about my work, not to relive pain for entertainment. Her voice cracked at the end, the pain breaking through the polished surface she had fought so hard to maintain. A tense silence followed. Ellen, still sitting in her chair, looked stunned, not out of anger, but out of shock at how far things had spiraled. The producers off camera were gesturing frantically, unsure whether to cut to commercial or let the moment play out. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Meghan took a deep breath, but her resolve had already shattered. She unclipped her microphone with a shaking hand and stood up, the metallic sound echoing across the studio. The audience began whispering, phones rising in the air as if capturing history. Ellen called out, Meghan, wait, please, but it was too late. Meghan turned for one final glance, a look that said everything words couldn't. Betrayal. Fatigue. Liberation. Some things, she said softly, are better left unsaid. And with that, she turned away, her heels clicking sharply against the stage floor as she walked off. The exit doors closed behind her, and the studio lights seemed to dim. Ellen sat frozen, her famous smile gone. The audience didn't know whether to clap, gasp, or stay silent. For a long moment, no one moved. The camera lingered on the empty chair, Meghan's microphone lying on the couch, a symbol of her breaking point. In the control room, producers argued about what to do next. The show had never seen anything like this before. Ellen finally exhaled, muttering quietly into her mic, "Well, that was unexpected." A nervous laugh rippled through the audience, but the energy was gone, replaced by a haunting curiosity. People knew they had just witnessed something real, raw, and unfiltered. Meghan Markle, the woman who had faced tabloids, royals, and global scrutiny, had just walked out not as a duchess, but as a human being who'd had enough. That moment would replay endlessly on social media, analyzed, debated, and dissected. But for Meghan, it wasn't about headlines anymore. It was about reclaiming her voice, even if it meant walking away from the stage, the lights, and the carefully constructed facade of celebrity diplomacy.